The rain was a solid sheet of gray, hammering against the roof of the car so hard I thought the metal might cave in. My hands were frozen on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. The windshield wipers were useless, they just smeared the world into a watercolor mess of black asphalt and the blinding red of the taillights ahead of us. The storm had come out of nowhere, a violent summer squall that had turned the highway into a river. Beside me, Ethan was shouting. No, he was screaming. His face was twisted, a mask of rage and fear that I didn't recognize. The veins in his neck stood out, and spittle flew from his lips as he hurled accusations. You're trying to kill us. Are you even watching the road? This is your fault. You should have listened to me. We should have never come this way. You always have to be so goddamn stubborn, don't you, Clara? You have to be right. You have to drive. You have to. The words were a physical assault, each one a slap. I flinched as he slammed his fist against the dashboard, the sound a sharp crack that cut through the roar of the storm. The car swerved slightly as I startled, and he grabbed the wheel, jerking it back. Jesus Christ, Clara. Are you trying to kill us? Just pull over. Pull the fuck over. But I couldn't. There was no shoulder, just a concrete barrier that separated us from a sheer drop. I could barely see 3 feet in front of the car. I couldn't stop. I just had to keep going, keep my foot steady on the gas, and pray we made it to the next exit. My heart was a frantic, trapped bird in my chest. The air in the car was thick and suffocating, smelling of his expensive cologne and the sharp tang of my own terror. This wasn't him. Or maybe it was. Maybe it always had been. I thought about the argument at his parents' house, the way he had dismissed my concern about the storm with a condescending pat on the head and a "don't worry your pretty little head about it, honey." The way he'd rolled his eyes when I suggested we check the radar. The way he had commanded me to drive because he was too tired to deal with this. The rain was a physical weight now, pressing down on the roof, pressing down on me. My grip on the wheel was so tight my fingers were cramping. We hit a patch of standing water, hydroplaning for a terrifying second before the tires found purchase again. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was trapped in a metal box with a man I was suddenly terrified of. Then, another flash of lightning, so close the thunder was instantaneous, a deafening clap that shook the car. A massive branch, wrenched from a tree by the wind, crashed onto the road directly in front of us. I had a split second to react. I wrenched the wheel to the left, a desperate, instinctual move, but the road was slick. The car spun. The world became a blur of headlights, sky, and the spinning, dizzying darkness. I heard Ethan scream, a high, piercing sound that wasn't even a word anymore. I heard the screech of twisting metal, the shattering of glass, and then the terrible, cold weight of water. It was dark. And cold. And silent. The pressure was immense. My lungs were burning, filled with the taste of copper and gasoline. I was underwater, my seatbelt a steel trap holding me in place. Panic, pure and primal, flooded my system. I clawed at the release button, my fingers numb and clumsy. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't find the window. My last thought, a single, desperate plea into the black void, was, I don't want to die. And then I didn't. I opened my eyes. I was staring at my own ceiling. The familiar crack in the plaster that looked like a rabbit, the one I'd been meaning to fix for years. Sunlight, warm and golden, was streaming through the sheer curtains, dust motes dancing in the beam. The air smelled different. It smelled like coffee and spring. Not gasoline and fear. I bolted upright, my hand flying to my chest. I was dry. I was in my own bed. In my own pajamas. The sound of a lawnmower droned lazily from a few houses down. A bird was chirping somewhere. It was the most peaceful, mundane, impossible morning I had ever experienced. I threw the covers off, my legs unsteady. The familiar scuffed floorboards. The water stain on the ceiling from the leaky roof. I walked to the mirror on my closet door, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The person staring back at me was me. But she was younger. Her skin was smoother, without the faint lines around her eyes. Her hair was shorter, a bob I'd cut in my 20s. My stomach dropped. No, not my 20s. My late 20s. I stumbled into the living room. Everything was exactly the same. The faded floral couch. The pile of books on the coffee table. My laptop was open on the kitchen counter. I walked over to it, my hand trembling as I touched the trackpad. The screen lit up. The date was May 28, 2016. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. I put a hand on the counter to steady myself. No. This couldn't be real. I died. In 2026. In a ditch. Water filling my lungs. I remembered it. I remembered the terror. I remembered the crushing weight of the water. I heard the jingle of keys at the front door. My body went rigid. No. No, no, no. The lock turned. The door swung open and he walked in. Ethan. He was younger, too. There was no sign of the man who had screamed at me in the car. His face was open, relaxed. He was whistling. He was holding 2 large paper cups of coffee from the cafe 2 blocks over. My favorite drink. With an extra shot of caramel. Hey, sleepyhead, he said, his voice a warm, familiar chuckle. He set the coffees on the counter, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I woke up early and couldn't get back to sleep. Figured I'd get us a head start on the day. We've got that showing for the Millers at 10. His eyes landed on my face. Whoa, you look like you've seen a ghost. Everything okay? He reached out a hand to brush a strand of hair from my face. It was the gentle, affectionate gesture of the man I'd married. The man I'd loved. The man who had been my partner for the last 8 years. But I flinched. A violent, full-body recoil that sent me stumbling back a step, my hand pressing to my stomach that his face fell. The warmth vanished, replaced by hurt. Then, a flicker of confusion, and then the beginning of something else. A shadow of the man from the car. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What's wrong with you? I couldn't speak. I could only stare at him, seeing him as he was, and seeing him as he would be. The screaming. The rage. The contempt in his eyes when he looked at me. This was it. This was the moment. The moment everything was about to change. I was back. I was alive. And I was not going to endure the storm with him again. The first crack in my resolve was a whisper, but it felt like a scream in the quiet of the apartment. I can't do this, Ethan. His expression shuddered. The easy, affable mask of the morning snapped back into place, but I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. This was the man who had built a successful real estate empire by reading people, by knowing exactly what to say and when. Can't do what, sweetheart? The showing I can handle it myself, no problem. You rest. You look pale. It's just a little stress, Clara. You've been working too hard. No, I said, my voice stronger now, cutting him off. The word hung in the air, foreign and sharp. Ethan blinked, taken aback. He wasn't used to being interrupted. Not the showing. I can't do this. Us. This whole thing. The confusion on his face was genuine. He was still processing. This was a script he didn't have. He set his coffee down on the counter slowly, deliberately, all traces of his earlier cheerfulness gone. He was assessing me. Clara, you're not making any sense. You're probably just tired. Why don't you sit down and drink your coffee? Don't, I said, stepping back as he moved toward me. Don't tell me how I feel. I'm not tired. For the first time in 8 years, I'm not tired. I'm wide awake. My eyes flicked to the fridge. A photo was stuck there with a magnet, a picture of us at a company picnic a few months before. We were smiling, our arms around each other. It was a lie. The whole thing had been a lie. The foundation had been cracking, and the storm in the car had just been the final blow. But I saw it all now, in this strange, impossible clarity. The way he had subtly isolated me from my friends, making them seem trivial compared to his grand ambitions. The way he had squashed my own career dreams, convincing me that my art was just a hobby, that supporting his business was our real future. The way he had chipped away at my confidence, year by year, a comment here, a dismissive wave there, until I felt like a shadow to his bright star. Ethan had crossed his arms, a defensive posture that I knew well. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're being dramatic. You're being childish. You had a bad dream. You're upset about your mother's anniversary. We're getting ready for a big day and you're having a breakdown. There it was. The minimizing. The dismissal. It was as predictable as the sunrise. In the past, his words would have made me question myself. They would have made me fold, apologize, and convince myself I was just being oversensitive. But not today. I was no longer that woman. I had seen the end of her story, and I refused to live it again. That I looked around the apartment we had shared. It was his style, sleek and modern. A showroom, not a home. This is the first time I'm seeing it clearly, I said, my voice low. This apartment. This life. It's all yours, isn't it? I just live here. I'm a prop. A pretty ornament to help sell your perfect life to your clients. But the script is wrong, Ethan. And I'm done performing. That's enough. His voice cracked like a whip, startling the silence. The shadow had won. The anger I'd seen in the car was there, blazing in his eyes. He took a step towards me, all pretense of patience gone. I don't have time for this. We have a schedule. You need to get a grip. Get dressed. Now. No, I said, the word a simple, powerful rejection. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I turned and walked into the bedroom, leaving him standing in the kitchen, fuming. His shock was palpable behind me. It was the sound of a man who had realized his favorite toy was suddenly refusing to play. I grabbed my old duffel bag from the back of the closet, the one I'd used in college. I opened the closet and started pulling out clothes, my movements efficient, purposeful. Jeans. Tees. The small velvet box where I kept my grandmother's ring, the only piece of jewelry I truly valued, which he always told me was too old-fashioned. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous. What the hell do you think you're doing, Clara? Packing, I said, not looking up. I'm leaving. He laughed. A short, incredulous bark of a laugh. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustrated disbelief. Leaving. Where are you going to go? Your parents are in Florida. You haven't talked to your old roommate in 2 years. Don't be an idiot. I'm going to take a page out of your book, I said, zipping the bag. I finally looked at him, meeting his gaze steadily. I was surprised to see the flicker of something like panic in his eyes. I'm going to be smart. I'm going to think about my own future. And my future does not include you. You can't just leave, he said, stepping into the room. His voice was lower now, a dangerous, silky tone. We have a mortgage. We have the Millers. We have a life together. You're being hysterical. This is a temper tantrum. You need to think about what you're throwing away. I am thinking about what I'm saving, I countered. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder. It felt light, but it felt like freedom. You want to know what I'm throwing away? I'm throwing away a man who treats me like an accessory. A man who will scream at me in a car until I'm too terrified to think. A man who thinks his rage is my fault. His face went white. Don't you dare bring that up. That was a moment of stress. We were in a dangerous situation. You were driving like a maniac, Ethan. I don't care, I said, and I meant it. I had already died over that moment. It wasn't worth the breath to argue about it again. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm done. Goodbye, Ethan. I walked past him, and he didn't try to stop me. I think he was too stunned. I walked out of the bedroom, through the living room I'd called home for so long, and out the front door. It clicked shut behind me, the sound of a door closing on my past. That I was standing in the hallway of our apartment building when the second wave hit me. The pure, unadulterated panic. I had just walked out. I had just told my husband, the man who held the reins of my entire life, that I was leaving him with nothing more than a duffel bag and some emotional scars. My hands started to shake. What had I done? This was insane. I had no money of my own. He'd always handled the finances. Where was I supposed to go? What was I going to do? I leaned against the wall, my head spinning, the adrenaline crash starting to set in. I had no plan. Just this burning, desperate certainty that I had to get away. I'd been so focused on escaping that I hadn't thought about where I was escaping to. Suddenly, the door to the apartment across from ours opened. A face I vaguely recognized peeked out, a woman in her 60s, Mrs. Abra. She was always quiet, kept to herself. She was holding a small basket of orange peel. She looked at me, standing there white-faced and trembling with a duffel bag, and her expression softened with immediate, unspoken understanding. "My dear," she said, her voice gentle and kind. "You look like you could use a cup of tea and a place to sit down for a minute. My kettle is on." Tears, hot and unbidden, flooded my eyes. It was the first act of pure, unconditional kindness I had received in years. I nodded, unable to speak, and followed her into her apartment, leaving the echo of my past life behind me, and stepping into the terrifying, exhilarating silence of the unknown. Mrs. Abra's apartment was a study in contrasts to the one I had just walked out of. Where Ethan and I had chrome and glass and sharp edges, she had crocheted doilies and heavy, dark furniture that smelled faintly of cedar and cloves. A massive potted fern dominated one corner of the living room, its fronds reaching toward the ceiling like green hands grasping for light. The walls were covered with framed photographs, a gallery of faces I didn't recognize, generations of a family I had never taken the time to know. She guided me to a worn armchair that seemed to swallow me whole as I sank into it. The fabric was soft, threadbare in places from years of use. It felt like being held. I clutched my duffel bag on my lap like a lifeline, my knuckles still white, my breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. Mrs. Abra disappeared into the small kitchen and I heard the clink of a kettle, the sound of running water. Through the open doorway, I could see her moving with a quiet, unhurried grace that seemed utterly alien to the frantic chaos still roaring inside my head. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them flat against the duffel bag to still them. She returned a few minutes later with two mismatched mugs, steam curling from both. She set one on the small side table next to my chair, then settled into the armchair across from me, her own mug cradled in her hands. She didn't speak. She just sat there, looking at me with those warm, dark eyes, waiting. The silence stretched, and for a long moment I couldn't find my voice. The words were stuck somewhere in my throat, tangled with the tears that were still threatening to spill. I had just done the bravest, most terrifying thing I had ever done. And now I was sitting in a stranger's apartment, drinking tea, with absolutely no idea what came next. "I'm sorry," I finally managed, my voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I don't mean to intrude. I didn't know where else to go." "I didn't know." "Stop apologizing," Mrs. Abra said gently. Her accent was soft, Nigerian, rolling the words like smooth stones. "You are not intruding. I saw you in the hallway. I saw your face. I know that face." I looked up at her, confused. "You do," she nodded slowly. "I was married to a man like him. Many years ago. I know the look of a woman who has just broken free. It is fear and relief all tangled together, like a knot you cannot undo." She took a sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving mine. "You are Clara, yes. From across the hall I have seen you coming and going. You always smiled, but your eyes were sad. I wondered when you would finally knock on my door." The tears I had been holding back broke loose then, spilling down my cheeks in hot, embarrassing rivulets. I wiped at them with the back of my hand, but they kept coming. I don't even know how I got here, I said, the words tumbling out between sobs. I just woke up this morning and everything was different. Everything was clear. And I couldn't stay. I couldn't be in that apartment with him for one more second. But I have nothing. No money. No car. No plan. I just walked out. Mrs. Abra leaned forward and set her mug down, then reached over and took my trembling hand in hers. Her skin was warm, papery thin, her fingers surprisingly strong. The plan will come, she said. Right now, all you need to do is breathe. You are safe here. He cannot get to you here. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel safe. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a clock was ticking. Ethan was a man who hated losing. He had built his entire business on winning, on closing deals, on never letting anything slip through his fingers. And I had just slipped through his fingers. It was only a matter of time before he started looking for me. What if he comes looking? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What if he will not come here, Mrs. Abra said with a certainty that surprised me. He does not know me. He does not think of me. Men like him never notice the people they consider beneath them. That is his weakness. He will look for you in the places he expects you to go. He will not look in the place he has already dismissed. I blinked at her, momentarily stunned by the sharpness of her assessment. She was right. In 8 years, I couldn't remember Ethan ever mentioning Mrs. Abra. She was just the quiet neighbor who sometimes left baked goods in the hallway. A nonentity in his carefully curated world. You know him, I said slowly. You've watched him. I watch everyone, she replied, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It is a skill I learned in a different life. When you grow up in a country where you must be careful who you trust, you learn to read people. Your husband is a man who has never been told no. He has been given everything. And when a man like that loses something, he does not react well. The words sent a chill down my spine. I thought about the way Ethan had looked at me in the bedroom, that flicker of panic I had seen behind his anger. I thought about the car, the screaming, the terrible certainty that he would have blamed me for anything that happened. I had escaped the physical drowning, but there were other ways to drown. I knew that now. I need to get away from here, I said, looking around Mrs. Abra's cozy apartment as if seeing it for the first time. I can't stay in the building. He'll find me. He'll convince me to come back, or he'll make my life so miserable that I'll have no choice. He's good at that. He's so good at that. Mrs. Abra nodded slowly. You are right. You cannot stay here. But you also cannot run blindly. You must have a plan. What do you have? What do you need? I opened my mouth to say nothing, absolutely nothing, and then stopped. My grandmother's ring. I had it. I pulled it out of my duffel bag, the small velvet box familiar in my palm. I opened it and looked at the delicate gold band with its tiny emerald, the only thing of any real value I owned. I have this, I said. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 16. She told me to sell it if I ever needed to, that it wasn't meant to be a burden. It was meant to be freedom. Mrs. Abra studied the ring, then looked at me with something like approval in her eyes. Your grandmother was a wise woman. That ring is your bridge. You sell it, and that gives you time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to find your feet. But I don't even know where to sell it, I said, the despair creeping back in. I don't know anything. I've been so wrapped up in his life, in his business, that I let my own life slip away. I don't have friends anymore. I don't have connections. I don't have anything. You have yourself, Mrs. Abra said firmly. That is more than you think. And now you have me. I have a daughter in the city. She is a good girl, smart, independent. She left her husband 2 years ago. She knows what it is like to start again. I will call her. She will help you. I stared at her, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of a woman I had barely spoken to in all the years I had lived across the hall. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "You don't even know me." Mrs. Abra smiled, and there was a profound sadness in it, a weariness that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Because someone did it for me," she said quietly. "When I left my husband in Lagos, I had nothing. I was terrified. I was alone in a city that felt like it wanted to swallow me whole. And a stranger took me in. A woman I had never met before. She gave me tea. She gave me a place to sleep. She gave me the courage to rebuild. That is how it works. We help each other. That is the only way any of us survive." She stood up and disappeared into the kitchen again. I heard her rummaging through a drawer, then the sound of her voice, low and soft, speaking into a phone. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was loving, reassuring. She was calling her daughter. I leaned back in the armchair and closed my eyes. The tea was growing cold in my hands, but I didn't care. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't actively terrified. I was still scared, yes. The fear was a constant hum beneath my skin. But there was something else too, something fragile and unfamiliar. Hope. A small, flickering ember that Mrs. Abra's kindness had managed to fan into life. I opened my eyes and looked around the room again. The photographs on the wall caught my attention. There were dozens of them, spanning decades. A young Mrs. Abra with a handsome man in military uniform, both of them laughing. Children at various ages, growing up through the frames. Weddings. Graduations. Birthdays. A life lived fully, messily, beautifully that I wondered what my own life would have looked like if I had never met Ethan. If I had stayed in my tiny studio apartment, painting until 3 in the morning, living on ramen and ambition. I had been so sure that loving him was the right choice, that building a life with him was the natural progression of things. I had given up so much, piece by piece, until there was almost nothing left. Mrs. Abra returned, her phone in hand. "My daughter, Amina, she will be here in an hour," she said. "She has a spare room. You can stay with her for as long as you need. She works at a law firm downtown. She knows people. She can help you with the legal things, the divorce, all of that." The word hit me like a physical blow. Divorce. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. I was still processing the fact that I had walked out, that I had said the words aloud. I hadn't even begun to think about the practicalities of untangling myself from a decade of shared life. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. "We have a joint account. The mortgage is in both our names. I haven't worked in years. He's going to fight me on everything. He's going to try to destroy me." Mrs. Abra sat back down and fixed me with a steady gaze. "Let him try," she said simply. "You are stronger than you know. You have already done the hardest part. You left. You walked away. Everything else is just details." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that I could survive this, that I could build something new from the wreckage of my old life. But the doubts were already crowding in, whispering their poisonous little thoughts. "You can't do this. You're too weak. You need him. You've always needed him." Mrs. Abra must have seen the doubt flickering across my face because she reached out and took my hand again. "Clara," she said, her voice soft but firm. "What is the worst thing that could happen if you stay? You live a life you hate. You lose yourself entirely. You become a ghost in your own home. Now tell me. What is the worst thing that could happen if you leave?" I thought about it. I thought about living in a tiny apartment with a stranger's daughter, scraping together money from a job I didn't have yet, navigating a divorce that would be ugly and brutal. It sounded impossible. It sounded terrifying. But it didn't sound as terrifying as staying. "Nothing," I said slowly. "Nothing worse than what I've already been living through." Mrs. Abra smiled, and the warmth of it wrapped around me like a blanket. "Now you are starting to understand," she said. "Now you are starting to remember who you are." The doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the quiet of the apartment. I flinched, my heart leaping into my throat. Ethan. It had to be Ethan. He had figured it out. He was here to drag me back. I gripped the arms of the chair, ready to bolt, to run, to do anything to get away. Mrs. Abra held up a calming hand. "Stay," she said. "I will get it." She rose and walked to the door with the same unhurried grace, and I watched with bated breath as she turned the lock and pulled it open. The woman standing in the doorway was young, maybe 30, with sharp cheekbones and calm brown eyes. She was dressed in professional black slacks and a crisp white blouse, a designer handbag slung over her shoulder. She looked like she had her life together in a way I had never managed. "Mom," she said, leaning in to kiss Mrs. Abra's cheek. "You said it was urgent. Is everything okay?" Mrs. Abra stepped aside, and the woman's eyes found me. She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable, then nodded slowly as if confirming something she had already guessed. "So you're Clara," she said. "I'm Amina. I'm here to help you." Amina's apartment was a study in controlled chaos. Legal pads were stacked on every flat surface, files spilled across the dining table, and a whiteboard covered one entire wall with what looked like a complex web of case notes and deadlines. But it was clean, organized in its own frantic way, and it smelled like lavender and fresh coffee. It felt alive in a way the showroom apartment across the hall had never managed. She led me to a small but comfortable guest room, its walls painted a soft sage green. A neatly made bed with a patchwork quilt sat against one wall, and a small desk with a lamp and a stack of blank notebooks occupied the corner. "You can stay as long as you need," Amina said, setting my duffel bag on the bed. "I'm rarely here, honestly. I work late most nights. You'll have the place to yourself for the most part." I sat down on the edge of the bed, the springs creaking softly beneath me. The exhaustion I had been holding at bay for the past several hours was finally catching up, settling into my bones like lead. "I don't know how to thank you," I said. "You don't even know me. Your mother barely knows me. This is so much." Amina waved a dismissive hand. "My mother has excellent instincts. If she says you need help, you need help. And she told me enough." She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "You walked out on a controlling husband without a plan and with almost nothing to your name. That takes guts. Most people don't have the courage to do what you just did. Give yourself some credit." I laughed, and it came out bitter and hollow. "It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like falling. Like I just stepped off a cliff and I'm still waiting to hit the ground." "Falling can be liberating," Amina said with a small smile. "You just have to learn to trust that you'll land somewhere soft. Or at least somewhere survivable." She pushed off from the doorframe and gestured toward the living room. "Come on. We need to talk practicalities. You said you have a ring to sell." I followed her back into the main room, pulling the velvet box from my pocket. I opened it and handed it to her. Amina took it, turning it over in her fingers. She held it up to the light, studying the emerald with a professional eye. "This is nice," she said. "Small, but nice. The emerald is decent quality. The gold is good. You could probably get a few thousand for it, maybe more if you find the right buyer. I know a jeweler in the financial district who handles estate pieces. He won't cheat you." I blinked at her. "You know a jeweler? A lawyer who knows a jeweler?" "Of course you do." Amina grinned. "I know everyone. It's my job. I'm a divorce attorney. I spend my days untangling messes, finding solutions, tracking down assets. This is exactly the kind of thing I do." "Do you have any other assets?" "Things in your name only, separate accounts, a car." I shook my head, the familiar shame creeping back. "Nothing. The car was in his name. The accounts were joint. I had a small savings account when we got married, but I moved everything into the joint account because he said it made sense. He said it was easier for planning. I was so stupid. Stop, Amina said sharply. You weren't stupid. You were in love. You trusted someone. That's not a character flaw, Clara. That's what people do in relationships. The problem wasn't you. The problem was him. He made you feel like you couldn't trust yourself. That's not your fault. I wanted to argue, to tell her all the ways I had let it happen, all the moments I had ignored the warning signs. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, letting her words wash over me. Okay, Amina continued, pulling out a legal pad and a pen. Here's what we need to do. First, we sell the ring. That gives you operating capital. Second, we need to open a bank account in your name only. Somewhere he doesn't know about. Third, we need to find you a job. What can you do? I opened my mouth, then closed it. What could I do? Before Ethan, I had been an artist. I had painted, sold a few pieces in small galleries, worked at a coffee shop to pay the bills while I built up my portfolio. But that had been a lifetime ago. A different person had lived that life. I was a painter, I said slowly. Oil and acrylic. Mostly landscapes and portraits. I was actually doing okay. Not great, but I was getting there. I had a few shows. People were starting to notice my work. Amina's eyes lit up. An artist. That's actually perfect. There's a gallery in the Mission District that represents emerging artists. I've done some pro bono work for the owner. Her name is Margaret. She's tough, but she's fair. If I call her, she'll see you. She might not be able to offer you a show right away, but she can give you advice. She can help you get your foot back in the door. The thought was overwhelming. I hadn't painted anything of substance in years. Ethan had convinced me it was a hobby, something to fill the time while he built his empire. He had made me feel like my art was trivial, unimportant. Over time, I had stopped believing in it myself. I don't even know if I can still paint, I admitted. It's been so long. I don't know if I have anything left. Amina leaned forward, her expression intense. You haven't painted in years because he convinced you it was worthless. But the thing about art is that it doesn't leave you. It might go dormant for a while, but it's still there. You just need to pick up a brush again. See what comes out. I stared at her, something shifting in my chest. She was so certain, so unshakable. I wanted that. I wanted to be that person, the one who knew what she wanted and went after it with everything she had. Maybe I used to be that person. Maybe I could be again. Amina glanced at her phone. I have to go to work. But I can drop you at the jeweler's on the way. And I'll text you Margaret's number. Call her. Set up a meeting. And Clara, she paused, her hand on the door. Don't let him win. He's going to try to tear you down. He's going to try to make you feel small and powerless. Don't let him. You came to me with nothing but a ring and a story, and I am telling you right now, you are stronger than you know. You just have to prove it to yourself. The jeweler's shop was small and unassuming, tucked between a dry cleaner and a vintage clothing store in the financial district. Amina dropped me off with a quick hug and a promise to check in later, and I walked in feeling like an imposter. The man behind the counter was older, with silver hair and a pair of half-moon glasses perched on his nose. He looked up as the door chimed and smiled, a warm, professional expression. Clara, right? Amina called ahead. She said you had something for me to look at. I pulled out the velvet box and handed it to him. He took it, then removed the ring with careful, practiced hands, holding it up to the light. He studied it for a long moment, turning it this way and that, then set it down on a black velvet mat. That beautiful piece, he said. Early 20th century, I'd guess. The emerald is Colombian, which is good. It has a few inclusions, but that's to be expected. The gold work is solid. I can offer you $3,000 for it. I felt the air leave my lungs. $3,000. It was more than I had expected, but also somehow less. It felt both monumental and completely inadequate. $3,000 was a lifeline, but it was also just a stopgap. It wouldn't carry me forever. Can I think about it? I asked, hating the hesitation in my voice. The jeweler nodded. Of course. Take your time. The offer stands for a week. But I'll be honest with you, Clara. The market isn't great right now. If you wait, you might get more, but you also might get less. It's a gamble either way. I nodded, slipping the ring back into the box. I left the shop with the velvet box tucked into my pocket, the weight of it both reassuring and oppressive. $3,000. It wasn't nothing. But it also wasn't enough to build a new life on. I stood on the sidewalk, the city moving around me in its usual frantic rhythm. People hurried past, their faces buried in their phones. Delivery bikes whizzed by on the street, their bells ringing a constant, frantic symphony. It was overwhelming, the sheer velocity of it all. I had been so insulated for so long, wrapped in the cocoon of Ethan's world, that I had forgotten how big the world actually was. I pulled out my phone, the one I had grabbed from the kitchen counter on my way out. It was a stupid thing to have taken, I realized now. Ethan could track it. He could see where I was. I should have left it behind. But in the panic of the moment, it had felt essential. I turned it off and slipped it back into my pocket. I would get a new phone later. A prepaid one he couldn't trace. Right now, I needed to focus on the next step. I found a small coffee shop a few blocks away and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a plain black coffee. I sat in the corner, the cup warm in my hands, and tried to think. What did I actually need a new phone? A bank account. Clothes that didn't feel like they belonged to someone else's life. And a plan. A real plan, not just running from one safe place to another. Amina's mother had been right. The plan would come. But right now, sitting in that coffee shop with the city humming around me, it felt impossible. The weight of everything I had just done pressed down on me, threatening to crush me into dust. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I jumped, my heart slamming against my ribs. I had forgotten to turn it back on. I pulled it out, staring at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. Clara, this is Margaret from the gallery. Amina gave me your number. She said you were a painter. I'd love to meet you. Are you free tomorrow afternoon around 2? I stared at the message, my hands trembling. This was it. This was the first step. And it was terrifying that I typed back a quick response. Yes. I'll be there. Thank you. I put the phone down and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I would walk into that gallery and tell Margaret my story. I would show her my work, or at least the work I hoped I could still produce. I would start rebuilding, piece by piece. The weight in my chest eased, just a fraction. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't safe. But I was moving. And for now, that was enough. The gallery was a breath of fresh air, literally and figuratively. The Mission District space was a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and high ceilings, the kind of place that made you feel like you were standing inside someone's ambitious dream. The walls were covered in bold, vibrant canvases, and the smell of turpentine and fresh paint hung in the air like perfume. I had forgotten what that smell did to me, the way it made something in my chest loosen and expand. Margaret was waiting for me at the front desk, a woman in her early 50s with short silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She was wearing paint-stained overalls over a black turtleneck, and she had the kind of no-nonsense presence that made you want to stand up straight. She was looking at a catalog of prints, but when I walked in she looked up and studied me with the same intensity she had probably used to study hundreds of artists before me. Clara, she said, not a question. She stuck out her hand, her grip firm and brief. Amina told me about you. She said you were a painter. She said you were good. I felt my cheeks flush. I used to be. It's been a while. Margaret waved a dismissive hand. It doesn't matter how long it's been. What matters is whether you can still make something that matters. She gestured for me to follow her, leading me through the gallery toward a small office in the back. The space was cluttered with paperwork, stacks of canvas, and a half-finished painting propped against the wall. She waved me into a chair and settled behind her desk, her eyes never leaving my face. "Tell me what happened," she said. "Amina said you were starting over. She didn't give me the details. I figure if you want me to help you, I need to know who I'm working with." I took a deep breath. The question was direct, but it wasn't cruel. It was the kind of question someone asked when they genuinely wanted to understand. So I told her. I told her about Ethan, about the years of slowly losing myself, about the storm and the crash and waking up in a world that felt both familiar and completely alien. I told her about Mrs. Abra and Amina, about the ring and the $3,000, about the blank, terrifying canvas of my future. Margaret listened without interrupting, her face betraying nothing. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "That's a hell of a story," she said finally. "Most people don't survive that kind of thing. Most people don't even try. But you did. That tells me something about you." "It tells me I was desperate," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "That desperate and brave look the same from the outside," Margaret replied with a shrug. "The question is what you do with it. Do you have any of your old work?" I shook my head. "I stopped painting years ago. I got rid of most of my supplies." I stopped, the familiar shame washing over me. I thought it was childish. I thought I needed to grow up and focus on real things. Margaret's expression didn't change. "Let me guess. He told you that?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Margaret let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "I've seen that 1,000 times. Women who could have been great, who let someone else convince them they were small. It's a tragedy, Clara. But it's not the end of the story." She stood up and walked over to a cabinet, pulling out a small sketchbook. She tossed it onto the desk in front of me. "Here. I want you to draw something. Right now. Doesn't matter what. Just show me you can still make something out of nothing." I stared at the sketchbook, my heart racing. It had been so long. I didn't know if I still remembered how. But Margaret was watching me, her gaze steady and expectant, and something in me responded to that. I picked up a pencil from the desk and opened the sketchbook. The first page was blank, and for a moment the emptiness felt like judgment. Then I closed my eyes and thought about Mrs. Abra's face. The warmth in her eyes. The kindness that had saved me. I started drawing. The pencil moved across the page, and it felt like coming home. I didn't think about it, didn't second-guess myself. I just let my hand do what it knew how to do. Margaret's face emerged on the paper, the lines of it familiar and foreign all at once. The curve of her cheek. The strength in her jaw. The unexpected softness around her eyes. I worked for maybe 20 minutes, lost in the rhythm of it. When I finally stopped and looked at what I had created, I felt something crack open in my chest. It was good. It was better than I had any right to expect. It was the best thing I had made in years. Margaret leaned over and looked at the sketch. Her expression softened, and for a moment I saw something like admiration flicker across her face. "You still remember," she said. "That's the hardest part. You were afraid you'd lost it, but it was there all along." She sat back down and folded her hands on the desk. "Here's what I'm going to do. I have a small space in the back that I use for storage. It's messy, but it has good light. You can have it for the next month. Come in, paint, work. I'll give you some supplies to get started. At the end of the month, we'll see what you've made. If it's good, I'll give you a show. If it's not, you'll have at least had a place to work." I stared at her, my mouth slightly open. "You're offering me a studio space for free," Margaret shrugged. "It's not free. It's an investment. I'm betting on you, Clara. I think you've got something worth showing. The only question is whether you believe it too." I walked out of the gallery with the sketchbook tucked under my arm and a set of keys to the back room in my pocket. The city was starting to chill as evening approached, the golden light fading into a soft, hazy gray. I felt lighter than I had in days, the weight of the past few hours lifted just enough to let me breathe. I found a bench in a small park and sat down, pulling out my phone. I had turned it back on after leaving the coffee shop, careful to keep it in my pocket. I had been avoiding looking at it, afraid of what I might find. But now, sitting in the quiet of the park with the sounds of the city fading into the background, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I opened my messages. There were 14 texts from Ethan. Where are you, Clara? This is ridiculous. Come home. You're being hysterical. I'm worried about you. Answer your phone. I called your parents. They haven't heard from you. They're worried too. Clara, I'm not going to keep chasing you. This is your last chance. You're making a huge mistake. The texts got progressively darker, the tone shifting from confusion to anger to something that felt almost like threat. The last one, sent an hour ago, reads simply, you can run, but you can't hide forever. I will find you. I felt the cold seep into my bones. He meant it. Of course he meant it. Ethan had never lost anything in his life, and he wasn't going to start with me. I was a possession to him, something he had acquired and was entitled to keep. The thought made me feel sick. I closed the messages and opened my contacts. Amina's number was at the top of the list. I typed out a quick message, he's looking for me. Texts. Threats. I'm scared. The response came almost immediately. I'm at work. I'll leave in an hour. Where are you? I sent her my location and put the phone away. The park had grown quiet, the last of the evening joggers disappearing into the twilight. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself and waited, watching the city lights flicker to life one by one. Amina arrived in a sleek black sedan, pulling up to the curb with the kind of easy confidence that came from years of navigating the city's impossible traffic. She got out and walked over to me, her heels clicking against the pavement. Come on, she said, her voice brisk but warm. Let's go home. We need to talk about next steps. We drove through the city in silence, the streets growing quieter as we moved away from downtown. Amina's neighborhood was a mix of old Victorian houses and newer apartment buildings, the kind of place that felt settled, lived in. She parked in a small garage behind her building and led me upstairs. The apartment was as chaotic as I remembered, but this time it felt comforting rather than overwhelming. Amina kicked off her shoes and gestured for me to sit on the couch. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 glasses of wine, handing one to me. Okay, she said, settling into the chair across from me. First things first. Have you eaten? I shook my head. I haven't really been hungry. That's the first thing we fix. You can't plan your future on an empty stomach. She pulled out her phone and ordered takeout, then set it aside and fixed me with a steady gaze. Now. Tell me about the gallery. I told her about Margaret, about the studio space, about the sketch I had done. I could feel the excitement building as I spoke, the first real excitement I had felt in years. Amina listened, nodding along. That's huge, she said when I finished. That's really huge. Margaret doesn't take on just anyone. She's known for discovering emerging talent. If she believes in you, that means something. But I don't have anything to show her, I said, the doubts creeping back in. I have one sketch. That's not a portfolio. That's not a show. Yet, Amina said firmly. You don't have anything yet. But you have a month. A month of uninterrupted work in a real studio. That's more than most people ever get. You just have to use it. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. I feel like I'm starting from zero. Like everything I had before is gone and I have to invent myself all over again. Amina leaned forward, her expression intense. That's exactly what you're doing. You're reinventing yourself. And that's terrifying, but it's also liberating. You get to decide who you want to be. You get to build a life that's actually yours. She paused, studying my face. What do you want, Clara? Forget about Ethan, forget about the money, forget about everything else. What do you actually want? The question hit me like a blow. I had been so focused on surviving, on figuring out the next step, that I hadn't let myself think about what I actually wanted. What did I want? I had wanted to be an artist, once. I had wanted to make things that mattered, to put something beautiful into the world. I had wanted to be seen and valued for who I actually was. I want to paint, I said slowly. I want to make something that matters. I want to be proud of myself. Amina smiled, and it was a real smile, warm and genuine. Then that's what you do. You paint. You make things. You find a way to be proud of yourself. She reached out and squeezed my hand. And you let me handle the rest. I'll deal with the legal stuff. I'll deal with Ethan. You just focus on building something new. The takeout arrived, and we ate in comfortable silence. The food was good, and I was hungrier than I had realized. I could feel the tension in my body starting to ease, the adrenaline of the past few days finally beginning to fade. By the time we finished, I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that only came from holding everything together for too long. I should get some sleep, I said, standing up. I want to be at the studio early tomorrow. Amina nodded. Good. Get some rest. And Clara, she paused, her expression serious. If he contacts you again, don't respond. Don't engage. Let me handle it. I know how to deal with men like him. I promised her I would stay silent, and I meant it. I had spent too many years giving Ethan my words, my energy, my soul. I had nothing left for him. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The city was still dark outside the window, the streets quiet except for the occasional hum of a passing car. I lay in bed for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, letting the reality of the past few days settle over me. I had done it. I had left. I was in a stranger's apartment, about to start a new life. It still felt impossible. I got up, dressed quickly, and headed out into the city. The streets were just starting to stir as I walked toward the gallery, the morning light pale and soft. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of bread from a nearby bakery. It felt like the whole world was waking up, and I was waking up with it. The gallery was quiet when I arrived. I used the keys Margaret had given me to let myself in and made my way to the back room. The space was small, maybe 8 feet by 10, cluttered with old frames and stacked canvases. But the light was good, just as Margaret had promised, and the walls were clean and ready for whatever I decided to put on them. I stood in the middle of the room and let myself imagine what it could be. A studio, a space for creation. A place where I could become the person I wanted to be. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. That I spent the morning clearing out the space, moving the old frames and boxes to a corner, sweeping the floor, setting up the easel and supplies Margaret had left for me. The work was physical and grounding, giving my hands something to do while my mind churned. By the time I was done, the room felt like mine. Small and bare, but mine. I sat down in front of the easel and stared at the blank canvas. The emptiness of it seemed to taunt me, a reminder of everything I had let slip away. I picked up a brush, dipped it in paint, and hesitated. What was I supposed to paint? The storm, the car, the terror of drowning? No. I didn't want to paint the nightmare. I wanted to paint the hope. The feeling of Mrs. Abra's hand in mine. The warmth of Margaret's voice when she said she believed in me. The first, tentative flicker of something that felt like joy. I started painting. The colors flowed from my brush, blues and golds and soft, luminous greens. I painted a woman standing in a doorway, her back to the viewer, looking out at a world that was bright and waiting. I didn't know who she was, not yet. But I knew she was moving forward. I knew she wasn't looking back. That I worked for hours, losing myself in the rhythm of it. When I finally stopped, my back was aching and my hands were stained with paint, and the canvas was alive with color. It wasn't finished, not by a long shot. But it was something. It was a beginning. I stepped back and looked at the painting, my heart pounding. It was good. It was really good. It was the first thing I had made in years that felt honest. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, my hands still trembling from the effort of painting. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it and felt the blood drain from my face. I know where you are, Clara. I found your phone location before you turned it off. I've been watching. You think you can hide from me, you think you can just walk away. I own you. I always will. You don't get to leave. I dropped the phone like it was burning me. The words were a punch to the gut, a cold, creeping dread that wrapped around my spine. He had found me. He had been watching me. The entire time, he had known where I was. I grabbed my phone again, my fingers shaking as I typed a message to Amina. He knows. He found my phone location. He's been tracking me. I don't feel safe. The response came immediately. Don't panic. I'll call you in 2 minutes. Don't leave the gallery. Stay inside. I'm on my way. I stood in the middle of the studio, my heart racing, my hands trembling. The painting I had just poured myself into seemed to mock me from across the room. You thought you could escape, it seemed to say. You thought you could start over. But he's always been there, pulling the strings. The door to the gallery creaked open, and I froze. I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving through the main space toward the back. I grabbed a palette knife from the table, my fingers closing around the handle like it was a weapon. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to slow my breathing, trying to think. The footsteps grew closer. They stopped in front of the door. And then a voice, familiar and horrible, cut through the quiet. Clara. I know you're in there. We need to talk. It was Ethan. The voice was a ghost I had been running from, and now it was here, solid and real, just a thin door away. I pressed my back against the wall so hard I could feel the individual bricks digging into my spine. The palette knife was cold in my hand, but I knew I couldn't use it. I wasn't that person. I had never been that person. And if I started now, I would be letting him win in a different way. Clara. His voice was softer now, almost pleading. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk. You owe me that much. 8 years, Clara. You owe me an explanation. The word "owe" hit me like a slap. That was it, right there. That was the whole problem. He had always believed I owed him. My time, my energy, my soul. It was never a partnership. It was a transaction. And I was done paying that. I took a deep breath and stepped away from the wall. I walked to the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, a frantic drumbeat that seemed to be counting down to something inevitable. I opened the door. Ethan was standing in the gallery, the morning light streaming through the big front windows. He looked different. His hair was disheveled, a strand falling across his forehead. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a button-down I didn't recognize. He looked like he hadn't slept. The carefully constructed mask I had known for years was gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded. There you are, he said, and his voice cracked. Clara. God. I'd been looking everywhere. I was so worried about you. I didn't move. I kept my hand on the doorframe, using it as a barrier between us. You tracked my phone. That's not worrying about me. That's stalking. His face crumpled. I was scared. You just disappeared. You left without telling me anything. I didn't know if you were okay. I didn't know if someone had taken you. I was going out of my mind. Ethan. I said his name slowly, making sure he heard every syllable. I left you. I told you I was leaving. You weren't worried about me. You were worried about losing control. He flinched like I had struck him. His eyes darted around the gallery, taking in the space, the paintings on the walls, the studio door behind me. Is this what you wanted? He asked, his voice rising. Is this the life you wanted, painting in some dusty studio, living with a stranger? You threw away everything we built for this. Everything we built, I repeated, and the words tasted like ash. Ethan, you built it. I just lived in it. You made all the decisions. You controlled the money. You isolated me from my friends. You made me feel like I couldn't survive without you. That's not a partnership. That's a prison. He took a step toward me, and I instinctively stepped back, raising the palette knife. He saw it and stopped, his eyes widening. Clara. What are you doing? Put that down. I'm not going to hurt you. I don't know what you're going to do, I said. I don't know you anymore. I don't think I ever really did. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and irrevocable. I watched them land, watched the way they seemed to sink into him. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew well, a sign of frustration and mounting anger. This is insane, he said. This is completely insane. You've lost your mind. You've had some kind of breakdown. I'm going to get you help. I'm going to take you home, and we're going to fix this. No. The word was a stone, hard and immovable. You're not going to take me anywhere. I'm not going home. This is my home now. This studio, this gallery, this life. You're not part of it. He stared at me, and for the first time I saw something I had never seen in his eyes before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. He was afraid of losing me. Not because he loved me, not because he cherished me, but because losing me meant losing the person he had built his life around. The mirror that reflected his own importance. You're making a huge mistake, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You don't know what you're throwing away. The house. The money. The life we had. I gave you everything, Clara. Everything. And this is how you repay me. I didn't ask for any of it, I said, my voice steady. I never asked you to give me anything. I asked you to see me. To value me. To treat me like an equal. And you never could. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the front door of the gallery swung open and Amina strode in. She was wearing a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, and she had a file folder tucked under her arm. She looked like a lawyer walking into a courtroom, and the effect was immediate. Ethan took a step back, his posture shifting from aggressive to defensive. Who the hell are you? He demanded. Amina didn't even look at him. She walked straight to me and put a hand on my shoulder, her touch grounding me. I'm her attorney, she said, her voice cool and professional. And I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Mr. Vance. You're trespassing. And your behavior constitutes harassment. I'll be filing a restraining order this afternoon. Ethan's face went white. A restraining order? She's my wife. You can't get a restraining order against a husband. That's ridiculous. Oh, I can, Amina said, pulling a business card out of her pocket and handing it to him. I've done it before. Men like you are predictable. You think the law is on your side because you're rich and you're used to getting what you want. But the law is actually very clear on this. You can't threaten people. You can't track them. You can't show up at their workplace and try to intimidate them. It's called stalking, Mr. Vance. And it's a crime. Ethan stared at the card like it was a snake about to bite him. You don't understand, he said, his voice shaking. She's not well. She's having a breakdown. She needs help. I'm trying to help her. Clara is perfectly capable of speaking for herself, Amina said. And she's been very clear. She wants you to leave. If you don't leave, I will call the police. And I will press charges. Is that what you want, Mr. Vance? Do you want to explain to your colleagues and clients why you're being investigated for stalking? The threat landed. I could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his jaw tightened. Ethan's reputation was everything. His business, his social standing, the carefully constructed image of the successful, charming real estate mogul. A stalking charge would destroy all of it. He looked at me, his expression a complex mixture of anger, fear, and something that might have been genuine hurt. You're going to regret this, he said. You're going to regret all of this. You had a good life, Clara. A life most people would kill for. And you're throwing it away. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm choosing myself for the first time in 8 years. That's not regret. That's freedom. He shook his head, a bitter, disbelieving laugh escaping his lips. Freedom. You think you're going to be free? You have nothing. You're nothing without me. You'll see. You'll come crawling back. They always do. Amina stepped between us, her body a barrier. I think you've said enough, Mr. Vance. If you don't leave now, I'm going to make that phone call. He stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him, and the sound echoed through the empty gallery. I stood there for a long time, my body trembling, my hands still clutching the palette knife. Amina gently pried it from my fingers and set it on the counter. You did so well, she said, her voice soft now, the professional mask gone. I know that wasn't easy. But you held your ground. You were so brave. I shook my head, the tears finally breaking through. I wasn't brave. I was terrified. I thought he was going to, I don't even know what I thought. You were terrified and you still stood your ground, Amina said. That's what bravery is. It's not being unafraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. She wrapped an arm around me and guided me to a chair. I sank into it, my legs finally giving out. The adrenaline was draining from my body, leaving me hollow and shaking. He's not going to give up, I said. You know that, right? He's not going to just walk away. He'll find another way. He'll try to destroy me. Amina nodded, her expression grim. I know. That's why we need to be smart. We need to get that restraining order filed today. We need to make sure your phone is off and stays off. And we need to make sure you're not alone for the next few days. I don't want to be a burden, I said. You've done so much already. I can't keep asking for help. Amina laughed, a short, surprised sound. Clara, this is not a burden. This is my job. This is what I do. I help people who are trapped get free. And you're not trapped anymore. You just have to stay free. She stayed with me for the rest of the morning. We went to the courthouse and filed the restraining order. We got a new phone with a new number. We changed the locks on Amina's apartment. Every step felt small, like pushing a boulder up a hill, but each one also felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By the time we were done, it was late afternoon. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. I was exhausted, but there was something else too. A quiet sense of accomplishment. I had survived the worst thing I could imagine. And I was still standing. We went back to the gallery. I wanted to see the painting I had started that morning, to remind myself that I had created something beautiful even in the middle of the chaos. The studio was just as I had left it, the canvas still propped on the easel. The colors were bright and hopeful, a woman standing in a doorway, looking toward a future I was just beginning to imagine. That I sat down in front of it and picked up my brush. Amina watched from the doorway, a small smile on her face. You're going to be okay, she said. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. But you are. You're going to make something beautiful out of all of this. I believe that. I looked at the painting and then back at her. How do you do it? I asked. How do you stay so strong? How do you keep believing in people when you've seen the worst of what they can do? Amina was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost distant. Because I've seen the best too, she said. I've seen women like you, women who had every reason to give up, find the strength to rebuild their lives. I've seen people become who they were always meant to be. It happens. It really does. I turned back to my painting and started working again. The brush moved across the canvas, and the colors came together in a way that felt right. I wasn't sure what the painting would become. I wasn't sure what my life would become. But for the first time in a long time, I was curious to find out. Later that night, I lay in bed in Amina's guest room, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day kept replaying in my mind, the confrontation with Ethan, the fear, the relief. I had done it. I had faced him and held my ground. It was a small victory, but it was a victory. My new phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up and looked at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. My heart seized, but then I read the message. Clara, this is Margaret. I heard about what happened today. I just wanted you to know that you're safe here. The gallery is yours for as long as you need it. Take care of yourself. We'll talk tomorrow. I put the phone down and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Margaret's words were a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I had people who believed in me. I had a place where I could create. I had a future that was mine alone. The fear was still there, a quiet hum beneath everything. But it was no longer the only thing I felt. There was something else too, something that had been buried for years. A sense of possibility. The feeling that, for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That I closed my eyes and let myself drift towards sleep. Tomorrow, I would pick up my brush and paint again. Tomorrow, I would take another step forward. But tonight, I would rest. I had earned that much. The month that followed was the hardest and most beautiful of my life. I woke up every morning before the sun, made myself a cup of coffee in Amina's tiny kitchen, and walked to the gallery while the city was still stretching itself awake. The streets were quiet then, the air cool and clean, and I let the rhythm of my footsteps become a kind of meditation. Each step was a small act of defiance, a reminder that I was moving forward, even when I didn't know where I was going. The studio became my sanctuary. I spent hours there, lost in the work, the world outside fading into irrelevance. The first few days were difficult. My hands were stiff, my confidence shaky. I would stare at the blank canvas for what felt like hours, the brush hovering, waiting for something to happen. But I kept showing up. I kept putting paint on the canvas, even when it felt like I was making a mess. Slowly, the mess began to take shape. That I painted a series of women. Women standing in doorways. Women looking out windows. Women with their backs to the viewer, their faces hidden, their bodies angled towards something unknown. I didn't plan it consciously. It just happened, the images emerging from somewhere deep inside me. I was painting myself, I realized. Not my face, but my experience. The feeling of being on the threshold, of not knowing what was on the other side but stepping forward anyway. Margaret came by every few days to check on my progress. She would stand behind me, her arms crossed, studying the canvases with an intensity that made me nervous. At first she didn't say much, just nodded and moved on. But as the weeks passed, she started to offer feedback. Small things, almost offhand. Push the contrast here. That blue is too cold for what you're trying to say. Trust your instincts more. You know what you're doing. One afternoon, about 3 weeks in, she came into the studio and stood in front of the largest painting I had done. It was a woman in a field of wildflowers, her arms outstretched, her face lifted toward the sun. Her features were indistinct, almost abstract, but there was something about her posture that radiated joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Margaret stood there for a long time. When she finally turned to me, her eyes were bright. "This is it," she said. "This is the one. This is what we're going to show." I felt my breath catch. "You want to show it," she nodded. "Not just this one. All of them. The series. It's cohesive. It has a point of view. It's about transformation, about finding the courage to step into the unknown. People need to see this. People need to feel what I'm feeling right now." I didn't know what to say. I had been so focused on the act of painting itself that I hadn't thought about the end result. I hadn't let myself imagine that anyone might actually want to see what I had created. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. When I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 2 weeks, Margaret said. "We'll do a solo show. It's short notice, but I can make it work. I know people. We'll invite the right crowd. You're going to be fine." After she left, I sat down on the floor of the studio and put my head in my hands. 2 weeks. A solo show. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss. I had spent the past month learning to paint again, but I hadn't prepared myself for the possibility that anyone would actually care. Amina came by that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. She spread everything out on the floor of the studio, and we ate while I told her about the show. She was ecstatic, her usual calm demeanor cracking into something almost giddy. "This is huge," she said, for what felt like the 100th time. "A solo show at Margaret's gallery. Do you know how many artists would kill for that opportunity?" "Amina, I can't even afford to frame the paintings," I said. "I have no money. I have no..." "Stop." She held up a hand. "I've got this. I know a framer. She'll work with us on a budget. And I've already talked to a few people I know who are looking to invest in emerging artists. This is going to work, Clara. You just have to trust me." I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that everything was going to be okay. But the fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface. The fear that I wasn't good enough. The fear that Ethan would find a way to tear it all down. The fear that I would fail, and that everyone would see it. The day of the show arrived faster than I expected. I spent the morning in the studio, adjusting the last few paintings, making sure the lighting was right. The gallery had been transformed. Margaret had arranged the paintings so that they flowed together, each one leading to the next. The space felt alive, the colors pulsing with a quiet energy. I stood in the middle of the room, looking at my work. These were pieces of me, pieces I had pulled out of the darkness and shaped into something beautiful. I had created them in the midst of chaos, in the space between fear and hope. And now they were here, hanging on the walls of a gallery, waiting to be seen. The opening was scheduled for 7 o'clock. By 6, I was a wreck. I had changed my outfit 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that Amina had loaned me. My hands were shaking, my stomach churning. I felt like I was going to be sick. Amina arrived early and found me pacing in the back studio. She took one look at me and laughed. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad." "It's just an art show, Clara. People are going to come, look at your work, and maybe buy something. That's it. People are going to judge me," I said. "They're going to see everything I've been through. Everything I've failed at. It's all right there on the canvas." Amina's expression softened. "That's the point. That's what makes it art. You took your pain and you made it into something that other people can connect with. You should be proud of yourself, not terrified." I wanted to believe her. But as the clock ticked closer to 7, the fear only grew. What if no one came? What if everyone came and hated it? What if Margaret was wrong about me? At 7 o'clock, the doors opened. I stayed in the back for the first 20 minutes, too nervous to face the crowd. I could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, the occasional burst of laughter. It sounded like a party. A party that was happening in my honor, and I was hiding in the bathroom. Finally, Amina came and found me. "You need to come out," she said. "People are asking for you. They want to meet the artist." I took a deep breath and followed her into the main gallery. The room was full of people, more than I had expected. They were clustered around the paintings, studying them, talking to each other in low voices. I saw Margaret in the corner, deep in conversation with a woman in a brightly colored scarf. She caught my eye and gave me a small, encouraging nod. I walked through the crowd, my heart pounding. People stopped me to introduce themselves, to tell me how much they loved my work. A woman with kind eyes and silver hair told me that one of the paintings had made her cry. A man in a suit asked me what inspired the series, and I told him, honestly, that it was about starting over. He nodded and said he understood. I was in the middle of a conversation with a young couple about the use of light in my paintings when I felt a hand on my elbow. I turned, expecting Amina, and found myself face to face with Ethan. He looked different from the last time I had seen him. His face was thinner, his eyes hollow. He was wearing a suit, expensive but slightly rumpled, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He was holding a glass of wine, and his hand was trembling slightly. "Clara," he said, his voice barely audible over the noise of the crowd. "I need to talk to you. Please." I felt the blood drain from my face. My first instinct was to run, to find Amina, to get away from him. But I was tired of running. I was tired of letting him control my life, even from a distance. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. "You're not supposed to be within 500 feet of me. You have a restraining order." "I know." He looked down at his shoes, and for a moment he looked almost ashamed. "I know I shouldn't be here. But I had to see you. I had to tell you something." I crossed my arms, a barrier between us. "You have 5 minutes, Ethan. Then I'm calling security." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I've been going to therapy," he said. "Since you left. I started a few weeks after you walked out. I didn't want to. My lawyer recommended it, thought it would look good for the divorce proceedings. But I kept going. And something happened. I started to see things differently." I stared at him, not sure if I could believe what I was hearing. "You're telling me you went to therapy because your lawyer told you to?" "At first, yes." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew so well. "But then I started to understand things. Things I never understood before. The way I treated you. The way I controlled you. I didn't see it. I genuinely didn't see it. I thought I was being a good husband. I thought I was taking care of you." "You weren't taking care of me," I said, my voice shaking. "You were imprisoning me. You made me feel like I was nothing. Like I couldn't survive without you." "I know," he said, and his voice cracked. "I know that now. And I'm so sorry. I can't undo what I did. I can't take back the years I took from you. But I want you to know that I see it. I see everything I did wrong. And I'm trying to be better." I didn't know what to say. The words felt too big, too heavy. I had spent so long hating him, so long being afraid of him. And now he was standing in front of me, telling me he had changed. It was too much. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because I've been watching you," he said. "From a distance. I know I shouldn't have. But I needed to see that you were okay. And I saw what you've done. I saw the show. I saw your paintings. You're incredible, Clara. You were always incredible. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy trying to make you small." I felt tears prick at my eyes. I blinked them back, refusing to let him see me cry. "You have no right to be here," I said. "You have no right to say these things. You hurt me, Ethan. You hurt me so much." "I know," he said. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, even if you never forgive me. But I had to tell you. I had to let you know that I see you now. The real you. The one I tried to bury." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to me. "This is for you. It's not an apology. It's not a bribe. It's just something I thought you should have." I took the envelope, my hands trembling. I opened it and pulled out a document. It was a deed. A deed to the studio space where I had spent the past month painting. He had bought it. He had bought the gallery. I looked up at him, my eyes wide. "What is this?" "It's yours," he said. "The studio. I bought it from Margaret. She didn't want to sell it, but I convinced her. It's yours, Clara. No strings attached. I want you to have it. I want you to have a place where you can keep creating." I shook my head, the tears finally spilling over. "I don't want your money, Ethan. I don't want anything from you." "It's not about money," he said, his voice desperate. "It's about giving you something I should have given you a long time ago. Something you always deserved. A space of your own. A chance to be who you were always meant to be." I looked down at the deed in my hands. It felt wrong. It felt like he was trying to buy my forgiveness. But it also felt like something else. Something I couldn't quite name. A gesture of genuine remorse. A small step toward making amends that I don't know what to say, I admitted. I don't know if I can accept this. You don't have to decide right now, he said. Just think about it. That's all I'm asking. He turned to leave, but I stopped him. Ethan. He looked back at me, his eyes hopeful and afraid. Thank you for coming, I said. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again. But I want you to know that I hear you. And I hope you keep going to therapy. I hope you keep getting better. He nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I will, he said. I promise. He left. The crowd swallowed him up, and I stood there, holding the deed, the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on me. Amina found me a few minutes later. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. Are you okay? What happened? Who was that man? It was Ethan, I said. He came to see me. He wanted to apologize. Amina stiffened. Did he hurt you? No, I said. He didn't hurt me. He gave me this. I held up the deed. Amina took it, read it, and let out a low whistle. Clara, this is a lot. This is serious. I know, I said. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what to do with any of it. Amina handed the deed back to me. You don't have to decide right now. You have time. But Clara, I want you to think about this. This isn't just a gift. It's a sign. A sign that he's actually trying to change. That doesn't mean you have to take him back. It doesn't mean you have to forgive him. But it might mean that the person he used to be is gone. And that's something. I tucked the deed into my bag and took a deep breath. The crowd was still milling around, the buzz of conversation filling the room. My paintings lined the walls, each one a piece of my journey. And I had made it. I had survived. I was standing in the middle of everything I had built, and I was still standing. That a few hours later, the crowd began to thin. People came up to say goodbye, to congratulate me, to tell me how much my work had moved them. By the time the last guest left, I was exhausted, but there was a quiet satisfaction in my chest. I had done it. I had shown my work to the world. And the world had seen it. Margaret came over to me, her face bright. That was incredible, she said. We sold 6 pieces tonight. 6. That's more than I expected by a long shot. I stared at her, stunned. 6 people bought my paintings, Margaret laughed. Not just bought. Loved. They loved them. You made something real, Clara. Something people can connect with. You should be proud of yourself. I felt the tears start again, but this time they were tears of relief. Thank you, I said. I couldn't have done this without you. Without Amina. Without everyone. Margaret squeezed my shoulder. You did the work. We just helped. The rest was all you. I walked back to the studio. The room was quiet now, the last of the canvases waiting to be packed away. I stood in the middle of the space, my hands on my hips, and looked around. This was the room where I had found myself. This was the room where I had learned to paint again. That I pulled out the deed Ethan had given me. The paper was crisp and new, the ink fresh. I traced the words with my finger, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The storm. The crash. The impossible second chance. The months of struggle and fear and triumph. I didn't know if I would ever forgive Ethan. I didn't know if I would ever trust him again. But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the woman who had drowned in a ditch. I was no longer the woman who had let herself be erased. I was someone new. Someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. That I folded the deed and put it in my pocket. Then I walked out of the studio, out of the gallery, and into the quiet city night. The streets were empty, the lights of the buildings glowing softly in the darkness. I walked slowly, savoring the feeling of the cool air on my skin. I had no idea what came next. But for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. The uncertainty didn't terrify me anymore. It exhilarated me. I had the rest of my life to figure it out. And I was going to make it a good one. I had already proven that I could survive the impossible. The rest was just details.